It's great to be here today. Welcome, Solomon.
Thanks for having me.
And so we're going to have a bit of a fireside chat. And I'm personally super excited to have this chat with you. I'm a huge fan of the work that you've done over the years. And like Lisa mentioned, the profound impact that you've had probably on everyone's lives, like she said, whether you know it or not. So we might have a chance for some audience questions at the end, but it depends on time. But yeah, just to get things started, I'd love to hear about your journey and maybe taking it back into your early childhood and what you got interested, what got you interested in computer in the first place, I guess.
Oh, wow. I just wanted to say thank you for the very kind introduction. Let's see. I don't know. I was really into Macintosh when I was younger because my dad was a musician, and so he had a Mac for editing, you know. And I was always, you know, I was always arguing that Apple was going to come back because it was the dark days, you know, the 90s, and I would actually got into fights in school over Mac versus PC. It was pretty serious. So I guess I got that out of my system early, you know.
Did you have any part in the adverts that went out, Mac versus PC, or did that just fuel the arguments?
Oh no,
on
that
the
was.
school floor?
I think that came later, you know. Yeah, you know, it was like the return of Steve Jobs, and you know, books were written about how Apple had failed, you know. Anyway, so yeah, I just got interested in computers and from there, and went to engineering school. And I was just really got excited about this idea of this new word that was floating around, infrastructure. You know, and it was this bold idea that instead of having one server run your things, it could be many servers, and they would somehow work together to form this, you know, supercomputer. Supercomputing existed, but that was a science thing, you know. And I just thought that was so cool, and I just sort of pulled on that thread and. Kept pulling and pulling and pulling, I guess. Yeah.
And I guess taking it forward into the early stage of your career, how did that start before you founded Docker? And what lessons did you learn maybe along that journey?
Well, I think the defining factor for me was being an outsider. You know, every step of the way. I forgot to mention I grew up in France, and you know, did not know anyone who had started a startup or funded one or even worked at one. And you know, France, the tech in France, and you know, this is 2007, 2008. It was just not a very, you know, there were no conferences like this, let's just say. And so I think the main, you know, what kept me going was just an inherent passion for what I was doing, I guess. You know, so it didn't really matter to me at the time that it was not hip or cool what I was doing. It was the opposite of that. And then you stick to it long enough, and then eventually you get a window of opportunity, but you have to be there when it opens, I guess. So yeah, just sticking to something long enough to see, you know, to see the results, I think was the main takeaway for me.
And I guess that's where the ideas for containerization and Docker started.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's been the same obsession for as long as I can remember, honestly. And you know, it was just a weird thing to be obsessed with.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning in one of our chats that we had that it was actually you were trying to solve issues around Python.
Right. Well, I mentioned that. A few factors came into play that helped make Docker successful, and I didn't understand what at the time. It was confusing to me because when we launched Docker in 2013, I had already been working on containers for over 5 years, and it seemed to me like we were just doing the same, you know, trying slight variations of the same thing over and over again, and so. And the previous iterations were really not as successful at all. Like nobody cared. But now all of a sudden everybody cared, and so one of the factors I think was that you know, you didn't need to patch the Linux kernel anymore. That was a big deal, and you know, the cloud, there was more need for it. I think the market was more ready, but also, the Python community, we just had terrible, terrible tooling and packaging. The packaging story for Python was always tough. And at the time, you had these, I guess we'd call them machine learning now, workloads, but already, popping up. And I remember there was computer vision, and there was a need to link against C libraries. So you had Python code, C code, and you had to combine it somehow. And that was just, not fun at all with language native tooling. And so the Python community was the first language community to embrace Docker, I would say, which is funny, because now they've forgotten all about it seems. And the Python tooling is still just as bad for packaging, so. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, I love Python. I love the Python community. Don't be mad at me.
So tell us about, so you launched Docker, but did it start out with that idea, or was it evolve into that idea? How did that come about?
Yeah, it was a long process of evolution. I mean, it was almost like a round trip. So when we started out as a bootstrapped startup, we wouldn't even, barely deserve the term startup, but out of my mom's basement in the suburbs of Paris, we were making an open source container management tool. It was Python. We versioned containers with Mercurial. We actually stuffed the root file system in there with source control. Thought that was really cool. And we used Couchbase for state management. It was a different time. And so it was like very clearly similar to to Docker. Just an earlier version of Docker. And then that bombed completely. Nobody cared about that. And so we pivoted to platform as a service. We used our container tech to go and compete with, at the time, Google App Engine, Heroku, and we could host applications. We could deploy and host applications in many languages when everybody else only supported one language. Because we used containers under the hood, and that was our secret sauce. So we pivoted to that, and then later, after realizing platform as a service is a really difficult business. We pivoted back to open sourcing the tech and the tooling, and that time the market was ready. Yeah, so it was, and I'm skipping a bunch of iterations along the way, but yeah, always that central, the central focus of this container tech feels like it has a lot of potential, and we're underutilizing it. We're using it like slightly more lightweight servers. They were on the same dimension as VMs. Do you want heavyweight virtualization or lightweight virtualization? That's how everybody thought about it. And now you'll hear things like, oh, containers existed before Docker. Well, yeah, the low-level tech existed, kind of. There were missing pieces. But that's how people used it. It was like a more lightweight server. And stacking a container on top of a VM, for example, was like no one did that.
Did you have a lot of trouble getting the community to understand what you were doing, or was it like once they got it, and then just ran with the idea?
I think it's more like it was a gradual expansion. There was a core community. That's something when I moved to the U.S. and the Bay Area, I realized, there are other people that actually are excited about this. And so we were, there was a very small niche community of, you'd call them platform engineers today, systems engineers. For example, the people at Heroku, as competitors, we were also friends. And so I realized, they actually understand the potential of containers. And, we would talk about that. And so there were a few people early on who they already knew, and then the Docker appeared, and and with it the opportunity to collaborate on it and make it, standardize on something and share it with the world. And so it wasn't just me or even the core, the employees of Docker.cloud at the time. It was this group. Actually Jeff Lindsay is in the room. I think he's an Austin local. Yeah, he was a core member of that community. And so we went out there and evangelized, and over time, we sort of pushed back the boundaries of what you could do with the tool, because also in the beginning it was a very rough, low-level component. You know, it was, yeah, it was like I was going to make a joke about the relationship to Kubernetes, but I can't think of a funny one right now. But it was like what Kubernetes wants it to be. You know.
I think for me, I don't know if Kubernetes kind of would exist without the work that Docker did.
Oh, yeah, no, it would not, for sure. But also, I think they're perfectly complementary projects. But what's interesting with Docker is there's always been two sides to it. You know, it's a tool for developers, and it's also a low-level infrastructure component. You know, and for a long time that was its strength. Because it allowed two very different communities, infrastructure and developers, to meet in one place. But then we paid the price later because the reason we were all in the same room was one big misunderstanding, which we, you know, to be honest, we kind of did not rush to dispel. You know, like we let everyone project what they wanted into Docker, and then later we had to clean up the mess and, you know, spin out low-level components so that something like Kubernetes could rely on runc and containerd. You know, to be boring tech as they're intended, while developers could keep using things like Docker, Docker for Mac, Docker for Windows, things like that. But that took a long time to evolve. And initially, we only had the low-level components. Docker was what containerd is today, and then we intentionally, you know, made it more and more accessible. You know,
was that journey and those decisions, was that driven internally by the team in Docker, or was it from the community and feedback that you were getting at all of the meetups that you were doing?
I think that particular one was me being very difficult with everybody because it was not obvious. It was really a community of systems engineers initially. But I really wanted it to be more than that because we had just pivoted away from a tool for developers, right? We were building a Heroku competitor, right? .cloud. And that was for developers. And then we spun out the core container tech that was running it all the way at the bottom. And that initially was for people building platforms like Heroku and .cloud, right? It's like we went from building cars to engines for other people to make cars. And that made a lot of sense. But to me personally, it was not enough, you know, and so it was a very non-intuitive. It was the only part really of the roadmap that was not intuitive. Everything else was just like you said, people complain about bugs, and so you fix them. You know, they ask for features, you add them. But this one, yeah, it was really felt like swimming against the current. Like when the first time I asked for us to ship a build of the Docker CLI for Darwin. You know, people are like, why the hell would you do that? Does Apple support containers? No. You know, it was very unintuitive. Yeah.
And did you realize the profound impact that Docker was going to have? I mean, was there a tipping point when you were like, this is going to go big?
Well, even now, I'm like, you know, it's a hard thing for a brain to process, I think, you know, because I mean, I can experience, this is about the limit of the number of people I can experience interacting with, you know. Yeah, no, it's very abstract, but at the same time, when I was in my mom's basement working in containers, I was just as confident that it was going to be huge, you know, and so even though nobody took us seriously, so I'm not saying that to say I knew it. It's more like either way, the containers are just that they are what they are. They're awesome and powerful, and me personally being recognized for getting more people to use them or not doesn't change that they were always going to be successful one way or the other. You know, so I feel like we were the agent of making that happen, you know, along the way, but many more people also were. So.
I'd love to know about your move from France to the Bay Area. Was it driven by anything in particular?
Money.
Money.
Well, we just could not find any funding. I mean, I had zero experience. I think we were terrible founders, but I guess not. But at the time, what I'm saying is, I guess I'm not sure I would have invested because really we just did not know anything. We knew the tech, and that was it. So Yeah, I mean, I struggled to find funding, and I couldn't, and so we would do these contract jobs during the day, and then hack on open source tools at night, and then I ran out of the little personal savings I had, Y Combinator saved us. Basically, we got in, and at the time you had to move to Mountain View, and so we did, and then we raised a little more money after that, and then. Slowly but surely, we got accepted into the Silicon Valley ecosystem. So, yeah, that was. I mean, if someone had written a check and said, "I believe in you," in France, I would have stayed probably.
But they said, "We believe in you," in the Bay Area.
Right. Oh, whoever wrote the check first won, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Was there lots of interest in investing in Docker? Was it, what was the pathway in terms of, I guess it took a bit of time to build that community, build the traction. You said you were working nights coding. And tell us a bit about that journey for others to learn about, that pathway and some of the troubles that you might have had and what lessons you can learn from that.
So many troubles. You mean up to the pivot to Docker or after?
Well, more about when you came over and just trying to get investment and trying to get traction and building communities and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I vividly remember being on the outside looking in and not knowing anybody or anything. And, I remember reading these blogs like the Mark Andreessen's blog about startups and Hacker News, and Fred Wilson, remember? Yeah, Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures, and I just, for me, it was another planet. It was like watching a movie. Wow, these people, it's their job. They work on this tech that I love, and they actually get paid for it, and they seem successful, and people are interested in it. So yeah, I remember that feeling very vividly, and it was just hard to. Let's see, what's a good takeaway here? Well, it's almost easier in a way because you don't have anything holding you back. Like there's no fear of looking ridiculous because at your core you are ridiculous. Like my career was ridiculous. My ideas were ridiculous, and so. What's another ridiculous idea to try? Just try stuff. I think it's harder when you actually feel that you have something to lose. Like that there's a perception that you're successful or on your path to success. So there's expectations. There's respectability, and but if you really want to, have some sort of a outsized impact, to do something asymmetrical at some point. I mean, I'm talking at you like you don't know this. You're like, yeah, we know. You got to put yourself out there, and at some point along the way, you will look ridiculous to someone, and that's just 100% certain. So yeah.
Where did that belief come from? It sounds like you always had it, but is there like a strength when you're sitting in front of other people and they're not on board with the idea, they think it's ridiculous? Where do you keep going?
Yeah, and so that's, I don't have a supernatural ability to, somehow ignore rejection and people's negative feedback. Like, it affects me a lot. I think it affects everyone. Or, sometimes I have the impression that others are immune to it and I get jealous. But I feel like they're not.
Just better at showing.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
Through.
So I think that's part of it. So I guess my message is, if you're out there building something and you want to, put it out to the world and be successful, but you feel like maybe you're not the right person for it because everyone else that you see, their story is perfect and they're just the right people and you're not, is 100% not true because everyone's just struggling. And I think that we all want to go back and polish the story, after the fact. So it kind of feels like these founders that made something successful, they knew it, they had the whole plan in place from day one, and there's a little bit of a Hollywood effect that's added that I think has this negative impact that it can discourage people.
You always hear about the success stories, don't you? You don't hear about
Right.
the failures along the way of,
Yeah.
of fail, build,
Yeah.
build, success, fail, and then build again.
Yeah, yeah, and the whole way, and every step of the way, you're a clown car, basically. I mean, how you feel and how you're perceived, serious or not serious. I think it's really, it's like when you're watching a movie, and there's the music to tell you if you're supposed to be scared or if it's a safe moment but real life isn't like that. So we had like you got to play your own music in your head because the rest of the world's not going to play the right music, the speech of victory at dawn music.
Sounds like a new startup idea to getting your own like personal music and personal soundtrack following you around everywhere you go.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
And I guess there's a lot of talk nowadays about failing fast and trying lots of things. And I guess how many founders have instantly found that product market fit? It takes time to do that. I guess when you're mentioning so you building a Heroku style service, and then you actually started with open source, and then you built the Heroku, and then you're back to the open source. Is there some recommendations in maybe how to manage that and how other people can learn from that?
Yeah, it's hard because I was actually on the panel at Y Combinator about pivoting, and they always invite me to the panel on pivoting. And it was really, actually, I learned a lot because I was with other founders who also had experience to pivot, and the one thing I noticed, we all noticed, was that we had very different pivoting stories, and so there isn't like one size fits all. But it's the toughest part about trying to build a startup or build something completely new. You're looking for the mythical product market fit, which is the moment where we experienced it with Docker, in a violent way. There's just a moment where everything's inverted. Before you're pushing something onto the market with, maybe you're 100% failing, or maybe you're not. It's working, and then it works a little better. But then at some point, sometimes something happens where, the market just physically grabs you and pulls everything.
What was that like? It sounds like you had that moment.
Yeah. I mean, that was for us. It was Docker. It was just this weird moment where nobody cared and then everybody cared, and you just cannot keep up with demand, and it might kill you. There's so much demand, it might actually kill you. Like that's you can't go fast enough, and the competition shows up, and oh, we heard there's oil here. We're going to start drilling also. And so you're looking for that, and along the way, you're always thinking every day, should I continue what I'm doing, or should I change direction? Am I a day away from finding product market fit on the current course, or am I is this doomed to failure? And nobody can tell you, basically. And so you got to decide for yourself, and sometimes people pivot. They can't stick to something long enough, and so they never have any chance of any idea succeeding. And sometimes you'll stick to something for too long without changing anything. So you're just sort of hitting your head against the wall again and again and again. And both sound stupid when I'm just saying it, but it's actually impossible to tell if you're doing one or the other, or if you're at the right middle. Like no one can tell you. And so I think that's the hardest thing about building something new. You just got to decide for yourself. And then if there's a team, you got to convince them, that you totally got this,
What was that like going from, sounds like you were pretty much on your own or a few of you in the basement, to now suddenly having loads of developers that you had to get on board with what the vision was, and potentially you going away from hands to keyboard and coding to now doing vision and direction?
Oh, you mean as individually?
Individually, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a transition, right, from building yourself to, fighting to have a little time left to build. That it's been a process for me to accept that, but I think, especially in this space where, I mean, we're pretty deep in the software ecosystem here, right? we're not making, I mean, maybe some of you work on teams that make consumer apps, but this is not the consumer app conference. So, you know, our customers, whatever we're building, are probably other engineers, you know, and so the products, I think, are more on the technical side. And so the people leading those teams building product, those kinds of very technical products probably ought to be technical themselves, and they have to know how it works, right? So you know, I'm like that. And the way I think about it is it's still, you're still building a product, you're just using a wider toolbox to build it. So you know, maybe it's not your hands on the keyboard, but I spend a lot of time in design. We really do a lot of bike shedding. You know, we've learned to embrace the bike shedding. You know, just argue over details of design. So for me, it's design. That's my vehicle for creating now. And if you have the right people on your team that are just good engineers and good designers, and they see what you see, then you talk with them. And then, you know, sometimes you write code, but I think it's possible to be too obsessed with lines of code as the only thing that matters, but there's a lot more to building a great product or tool than actually writing code. You know, I guess with AIs writing all the code for us soon, then that's going to be even more obvious.
Yeah, but it will all turn into designers and directing what AI does.
Yeah, and I don't mean you have to be in charge to do the design. I mean, I think it applies to everyone in our team. For example, like even the people on the team whose primary job on paper is to write code, I don't think that's their primary job. You know, the code is just a way to get something done. But I expect them to be designers also, to have an opinion on, you know, to have empathy for the user. Okay, what will be pleasant? What will be efficient? And then, you know, we talk about that more than what's the structure of the code you're writing. You know, so.
And now you've gone full circle again. Started Dagger.
Oh, yes.
So I know myself, I've founded a few businesses, and a startup for me is super exciting, super scary as well. Crazy hours, you know, building things, and you're doing all that again.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Dagger and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So Dagger to me is it's continuing what I started with Docker. That's how I think about it. You know, it's built on containers, and it could not exist without containers. But it applies it to solving problems that I was hoping initially we would solve with Docker, but at some point you just have to focus and you realize, okay, containers and their applications are bigger than one company. We're applying containers to the wonderful world of CI/CD pipelines. You know, we're taking all these, you know, artisanal scripts that hold the application delivery together and turning them into beautiful codes with a nice API, and it all runs in containers, so the pipelines run the same everywhere. It's basically the same pitch we had, you know, for the application, except now it's for the pipeline that ships the application. We're containerizing that. In a nutshell, that's what we're doing.
I love your expression I saw on a video once that you said about the push and pray.
Oh, push and pray.
Explain about that. I love that.
Yeah, so you know, we have a booth. We're a proud sponsor of Civo Navigate, and you know, on the booth it says, "Before Dagger was push and pray." Yeah, you know, and anyone here, you know, either you know what I'm talking about or you don't, and if you do, then come to the booth. We'll help you out. But yeah, it's just, you know, I think we're all out here to. If you're making a tool, you know, you got to find a problem. Like you got to find pain. Someone experiencing pain, and then you figure out a way to solve it. So we're sort of attracted to pain in a weird way, you know.
It's not only the pain; it's the joy of seeing the solution at the end of it. Right.
Yes.
At least that's what I do.
No, of course, yeah. But you develop a radar for it, right? It's sort of you prioritize based on pain. You know, is someone in a lot of pain with it? Okay, no. So okay, so this is more painful. So we're going to do this first. Yeah.
So is the CI/CD as a target from a lot of personal pain through what you've been doing previously, or just talking to community?
I mean, I've experienced it, but that's not where it came from. So me and my co-founders, Sam and Andrea, who were very early employees actually the very first employees at Docker, also came from France. So they've seen that basement, my mom's basement. They've been there, and then Andrea wrote the first line of the Docker repo. Like the first commit is his. Sam ran all of engineering, and so they went out and decided to, we all left Docker at some point, and they started this process of doing a startup, and I joined a little later, and then we went and talked to a lot of people. We asked questions about pain. How's it going? Anything going really wrong? Could we help? But dozens and dozens, I think at this point, hundreds of conversations like that, and then you see patterns. And the initial idea was really different. I won't say what it was, but the reaction to that was lukewarm. But then people were like, oh, you're the Docker guys, right? Can you help me with my deployment? Because I'm having a lot of trouble. So it was not even an insight, like, oh, we're going to solve this. Initially it was, let's go talk to people and see what problems they have. Oh, they all hate their deployment pipelines. I'm saying deployment in a broad way, ship the thing. And so, so we just literally, the pain radar activated, and then we got in there and looked for a way to solve it, and it took us a long time to find a way to solve it that would be new and unique. So it did not come out of the tools to solve the problem came out of our experience with Docker, for sure, and being in the middle of that ecosystem. But finding the right problem to solve, actually, we had to start from scratch and sort of approach the market as beginners. Because, 10 years had passed. It's really easy to fool yourself into thinking you've got it all figured out. I actually thought deployment was solved. I thought, well, didn't we solve that with Docker? But no.
And did you see a lot of parallels from when you were starting Docker to starting Dagger, or did you feel it was more streamlined? Now you'd done it before, you'd been really successful, so it was easy. Oh,
the second time it's super easy. Everything's perfectly smooth. Yeah. No, it's super hard. Actually, the only thing that I felt was easier, actually two things. The first thing that was easier was raising money. Because I think investors actually have, I don't think it's fully rational, but investors really love when you've had another startup before and it was successful. I guess it's kind of rational. It makes sense. But now I feel like, okay, this is just as hard the second time, so is this really less risky? I don't know.
Do you feel there's more pressure now that you've got kind of Docker behind you when you go to investors and they're almost open checkbook before you walk through the door?
Well, if that's your definition of pressure, then yeah. Well, yeah, it's easy. It's easier to raise money for sure. But then the pressure doesn't come from the investors. Really, it comes from, it's self-applied. It's like the second album problem. Okay. Okay. So the first album was Docker. So what do we do now? So it's this thing I was talking about before. If everything about you is ridiculous anyway, then you're just going to naturally do the right thing, which is to just throw more ridiculous things at the market until one of them sticks around. No one's going to remember. Like the Docker pivot was our 8th pivot attempt, and no one remembers the first 7. Nobody cares. But yeah, so it's you have to somehow deal with this potentially paralyzing force where you don't want to look like an idiot launching something unfinished or bad. And it's rational to worry about that because there is the first thing you launch after Docker, there's going to get there's going to be a projector on it, and so we had to devise a system to deal with that, and so we built this sort of semi-private community. We would just launch. We built 60 prototypes, and Dagger was like the 61st or something like that. over the course of 2 years during lockdown, and we just would prototype things and then show them to a little private community on Discord that grew over time, so we could launch without really launching. We could get user feedback without getting, press. The Docker guys launched their new thing. It's terrible, and then you kind of felt safe to be creative in that way. It's really all in our. I mean, we could have just launched it. I'm sure maybe it would have been fine, but you have to deal with your own psychology also.
I guess creating a safe space for you to experiment and play.
Yeah, you need that. You need that. Yeah, I think that's why big companies are so bad at, startups. That's why startups exist, and Google hasn't just done all the things, because I really think it's because of the state of mind and the people in those big companies. Now you've got something to lose, and you got to look ridiculous at some point to succeed. So, yeah.
It's interesting you were saying as well, going back to, you said the 60th prototype and, saying about failing fast and, I think it is rare that someone just comes up with an idea and it works first time.
Yeah.
It takes time, it takes effort, it takes experimentation, feedback, all those kind of things. So, so where are you now in that journey with Dagger? I mean, and what lessons are how have you done things differently to what you did at Docker? I mean, in terms of the team that you've built, have you built it in a different way? Did you go dev heavy first time, where this time you've gone and built a marketing team, or how have you done things differently? Well,
there are several differences, but one thing we did very differently is we started with the team and the team culture even before we had a product or an idea for a product. So while we were in the very early stages of just going out there and talking to people about their pain, we were, as co-founders, we were talking about what kind of a team do we want to build and how do we want to feel when we work together, and that was really informed by your experience at Docker, where famously not everything went great. Otherwise I'd still be there probably, and so externally there was a lot of drama, and internally it was not very fun either. Mostly because we were dumb and the royal we, lack of experience showed, and so the lack of experience led to a lack of focus on the people and just being very deliberate about who you work with and how everyone feels,
So what are you aiming for? What's the feeling you want when you're working in Dagger?
Well, you want it to not feel like a job. You want to be excited, and you want to be just sort of pinching yourself, thinking, "Wow, I really work with these people. I'm so lucky," And if it's the right team, then product market fit will flow from that team just existing. And it's that state of mind that I talked about in the beginning, from the early days. Okay, sure, I'm a client. Nobody cares what I'm doing, but I care. I'm excited, and so I've got all the tools to succeed on my own. I'm just going to I've got this insight and experience, and I trust it, and I'm going to crank, iterations out until I figure out a way into this market, and I wasn't doing it intentionally. I was just young and naive, but that's what I was doing. And so this time, we want our whole team to be like that, and so we have to engineer it, and now we get the benefit of experience. So we on average, the Dagger team is more experienced. We've gone through various trials in life. We've experienced pain, and with that pain comes wisdom, I guess.
So for the other founders out here, what would be your number one thing when you're building a team or looking for that culture fit that they should be focused on?
Oh yeah, well, just picture yourself working with that group of people for 5 years or more, because that's how long it takes for a startup to at least have a shot at making it, and so you better enjoy, those people's company. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that culture's vital, isn't it? Even those first hires almost create the culture, don't they? So having the great people is what makes great business.
Yeah, and I guess a more practical piece of advice for me would be, if you're not sure, don't hire. Yeah, if you're not sure, don't hire, because you can always. When you're hiring someone, the person joining your team is taking a bigger risk than you are hiring them. So it's a big responsibility, you know. So if you're not sure, everything else you can screw around, and you know, but don't screw around with people's careers and livelihood, you know. So you gotta, in doubt, just don't make the hire, and yeah, that I think is the main thing.
Cool. We might have some time for a few audience questions. Have we got a microphone?
Let me position my dagger socks.
Thank you. We're going to run around, and while you're thinking of your first questions, I have a question for Solomon along the lines of your push and pray program. Does that mean we all get to push to prod on Friday afternoon and still enjoy our weekends? Is that the plan?
No, we don't solve that. Well, yeah, push and pray. It's specifically the you know, when you push a new version of your code, then the CI pipeline takes over, and it's supposed to build, test, and deploy it, and everything goes fine. But then, of course, the pipeline itself, someone needs to create that, and over time, you got to, you know, improve it, fix it. You know, we think of it like the software factory. You know, we're writing the source code, that's like making the prototype of the car. And then when the prototype is perfect, you're not done. You got to manufacture it and get it out there to millions of people. No one buys an off-the-shelf factory, right? You got to design the factory along with the product. That's how the physical world works. And so the equivalent of the factory is those CI pipelines in our world. Someone's got to work on that pipeline. And right now, we're stuck in this kind of horrible place where even though your pipeline is software, you don't get to develop that like everyone else develops their software. You're stuck, you know, 20 years in the past, where you have to make the change, and then you have to commit and then push the change to the pipeline, and then you wait, and then you get an email or something saying you made a typo, and then you try again. You make, you know, you fix the typo, and you commit and you push and you wait again, and so you have a development loop for the pipeline that's in minutes for one round trip. Meanwhile, the application itself is being developed in loops of a few seconds. You know, change, run, change, run. So that's not the only problem with CI/CD today, but it's definitely it's a hair and fire problem for whoever the designated DevOps person is on the team. And sometimes they didn't want the job, but they got it anyway. Oh, you're the new guy. Okay, go fix the CI pipeline. So we again, if that's you, come to our booth. Yeah, that's push and pray.
Okay, we have a question here. Go ahead and state your name.
Absolutely. Hello, I'm Mark from Pieces for Developers. I know you talked a little bit about open source, but one of my questions was, what are some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome those with open source specifically?
Oh, with open source? Well, the main challenge, I would say, was open source. Yeah, open source is tough. I don't know. Well, let me take that back. I think that the open source as a way of working together for engineers is a blessing, because neither Docker nor Dagger would exist without it. You know, so it's just an incredible achievement that you know, as an industry, that we have this standardized way of working together. And I would say generally, in terms of engineering, I think it's our gold standard for software engineering. It's the you know, I consider it to be a standard for how you're supposed to develop software. But everything else about it is really tough. You know, the one difficulty is, I think there's a cultural, there's sort of a cultural, there's a scene attached to it. You know, there's some cultural values that inherited from the the early days of it, of the open source movement. It coming out of U.S. universities, and it has a sort of a hippie mindset attached to it that I think. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem is it's being applied now in a world that's much bigger and has a lot more people in it. It's not just a few people at Berkeley anymore, and especially the relationship to money is a problem because if you listen to a few of the early pioneers of open source, you'd think it's if you make money or you need money in your life, then you're the problem. If you have bills to pay, then that's your problem. So I think that monetizing open source and how you go about it is an unresolved problem. But if you're open source, in my mind, is an opportunity to. It's a huge opportunity for people to get into tech and be more successful, and not everyone has the luxury of working on an open source project on the weekends or without pay. And so we have to be okay with the fact that some people get paid to write open source code to contribute to it, and that doesn't make them less, bad. It seems obvious, hopefully, but I don't think that's widely understood by everybody. And until we solve that, I think we're basically gatekeeping open source. We're gatekeeping so that we're reserving it for people who can afford to do it without pay. So something we got to solve, I think.
I think there was a question at the back.
Hi, my name is Ashfaq Ahmed. I work for Dell. So my question is, you invested your time and effort in building another CI/CD product. There are a bunch of products already in the market. What motivated you to go in that direction?
Pain. I mean, I honestly, I don't think of CI/CD as a market category. I don't think of it as a market category that's exciting. At no point did I wake up and think, oh, I got my business strategy figured out. We're going to go after CI/CD as a market category. We just talked to teams, and they had this very painful problem, and we saw a pattern. And I think categories can change over time. I think if we're successful solving the problem, I think CI as a category maybe doesn't exist in 10 years. Because these categories are kind of weird, right? It's a very fragmented space. You have CI, CD. First of all, what's the deal with those two being different? And then you got builds, you got configuration management, you got platform as a service. That's still a thing. I think OpenShift, is $1 billion ARR business. Just Red Hat OpenShift. Heroku's still out there making lots of money. You got infrastructure management. You've got whatever Ansible is. That's something else. And then you got lots and lots of shell scripts everywhere. So when I look at that mess, I don't see 10 neatly divided categories. I just see a huge pile of pain. And I think the categories are part of the problem. It creates these silos. So yeah, I guess there are other vendors out there, but they didn't solve the problem, did they? So we'll solve it together. But yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Yeah, sorry, I gave long answers.
Quick fire answer.
Quick, sorry. It's really hard for me to do that. Okay.
All right, so Roberto Mejia, and I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a couple of things about fundraising and some of the troubles that you had in London and then moving over to the Bay Area. So what are some of the things that you did to be able to overcome those problems, and what are some of the tips that you would say for new CEOs trying to raise funds?
Well, it was Paris, not London, but no problem. I feel like it's very different now. I feel like the European VC scene is much better now than it was in 2010. So I think it's now possible to build a successful startup not without having to move to the US, so I wouldn't obsess over that too much. It depends on your customer though, if your customer is in the Bay Area. If they're all in the Bay Area, maybe you need to move there. But yeah, I feel like we're really lucky in that we have a lot more options now.
Thank you.
Okay, and we have one last question.
Okay.
Yeah, I was wondering from a startup perspective, when did you know it was time to leave Docker? And how do you help other people in the startup world realize that they grew it to where they could, but maybe it's time to give up and hand the baton to somebody else? How did you know that, and what were the factors that made you make those decisions?
Well, it's funny you should say that, because in my case, I made the opposite mistake. You know, I brought in an external CEO too soon, and then my life was miserable after that. But yeah, I think you got to be. It's hard. There's no good answer, but yeah, you got to figure it out on your own mostly. I think a lot of what we talked about today boils down to your own psychology. You know, knowing your own limitations, but also being confident and somehow juggling the two. Yeah, that's why the startups have boards. Sometimes it's not up to you. You know, they just decide a new CEO should give it a shot. You know, so I think it's healthy in that sense that founders have slightly less power. I think, you know, with this new fundraising market, because if you run your startup for 10 years or more, and no one, not even your board, can really do anything other than give you optional advice, I actually think that's unhealthy. So yeah, if you're the founder and you're the CEO, you still got to earn your job like everybody else. So I think that's the healthiest way to approach it. CEO is a job.
Well, thank you, Solomon, for all your insight today. It's been great chatting to you.
Thanks for having me.
Seems like the theme maybe is pain. And I've got one final question for you. We've got the mechanical ball. Talking of pain, are you going to ride the mechanical ball?
I would love to, but I have back problems. That's my excuse. That's my excuse.
Yeah, so thank you for...
What's your excuse? Are you going to...
If everyone could give a great round of applause.
Thank you.